All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Hakimian Show, and it's a blessing to be with you. Today, I have with me Carl Contreras. He is executive committee man of the North Miami Republican um, uh, Board, and he's also a chartered financial consultant, and he's the conservative tax warrior. Welcome today, brother.
Hi, Jack. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. What got you involved and engaged in politics?
Well, I really was always uncomfortable with the way that the government used to behave, but it wasn't until about maybe a decade ago that I took a particular interest because I partnered up with a very well-educated but very liberal northeastern transplant, and I was always listening to his comments about how wonderful and how glorious the New York Times was, and how they were always mocking conservative views and making fun of things like Reaganomics. It was, and how they all seem to agree with Keynesian economics.
Hmm.
If I remember right, that debate was settled
Okay.
many years ago. Okay.
Now, Keynesian economics is
Uh,
basically
well, Robert Maynard Keynes was I believe he was a former Federal Reserve president who was basically called in to debate with Hayek, uh, an astroeconomic leader from, I believe he was from the University of Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
And they were called in to debate the supply side and the demand side of economics,
Okay.
and how it flourished so successfully over Europe, the supply side, and for some reason, I think Hayek stood a much stronger ground because of the centuries of success that Europe saw under this system.
Yes.
However, because of the failed policies of the demand side of economics, which is what they were, the progressives were pushing at the time. They tried to justify that the demand side just needed more time, if the government can just push another button, that they had a magic wand or whatever it was. And basically, it was a full-fledged war against the supply siders till today,
Okay.
as a matter of fact. So that, becoming so close to me, it started to ick me.
And when you say supply side, is it that liberals basically feel that that government should be involved in that supply, or
No, the
that
opposite. That they can stimulate or they can
infuse
diminuate
money?
demand
They can
by
infuse
by 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 the money supply, which is what the only tool that they really have. That the U.S. Federal Reserve is.
basically what Roosevelt did in the Great Depression.
Well, yeah,
So really large
that's
government
when.
spending
True.
in order to get the economy going.
Well, yeah, that was the only thing they probably had available. Nothing else was at
Yeah.
that time really working. So they thought by getting
But how do
people
you
back
keep
to
that
work.
going
Well, you don't.
if
Eventually, you
the
got to pay. You
markets
got to.
aren't generating taxes and
Well, you have to first of all have jobs created. The government doesn't create jobs, it creates the environment that makes it conducive for businesses to want to create anything.
yeah.
If they need to expand, well, they have to have the right environment. The tax policies are very important to the person who puts money on the table to build a new plant or build inventories. All of those decisions have to be in their favor, and it has to be profitable for them. Otherwise, there's no real means or purpose to do it.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's where I guess the real litmus was. Are the policies that they were creating any jobs? And what we found out after the war, there was a stagnation for like 15 years that led to some of the toughest times America has ever
After
seen.
World War One or
Uh,
World War Two.
well, after World War II too. It was because of the World War II that we were able to basically come out of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Now,
Because there was a
people.
lot of spending on industry and weapons and and yeah,
because of the war, there was expenditure.
population decrease, just different
Well,
factors.
well, when people are successful and industry is growing and people are fully employed,
Yeah.
family structures are going to be in effect
Well,
created
did
by
war
that.
create opportunity too? I mean, there was kind of an expansionist that happened, right?
Well,
Far as,
I don't know what you mean
uh,
by
I
opportunity.
mean, I'm saying, there was uh, like America found its corporate presence in different parts of the world now. I mean, World War II. I mean, the Allies won. So did
True.
that affect um, the
It
economy?
affected certain industries. It
Yeah,
certainly brought in the steel industry,
yeah,
the shipping industry, the ammunition industry. I'm pretty sure that going back to the Civil War, companies that produced gunpowder did well. However, we're an industrial nation at this point, and we were building railroad trains. We were building automobiles. We were building our shipping.
yeah,
We were becoming the preeminence at the time. We were taking our global position. Um, but still, the war brought us into a period where a lot of our labor, a lot of our young men, were leaving to fight in a foreign country.
yeah. So this philosophy basically says that the government should infuse more
That the
money into.
government has the ability to call it at the right time when it's necessary to infuse money, when it's necessary to take away money. And basically, what they're using is the money supply, or what they call the M1. Um, However, what we usually find is that they leave bad policies in place,
Mm,
usually for very long periods of time, cause all sorts of havoc, and then only under political pressure will they start to change any of these failed policies, and by maybe stimulating the direction of money, or possibly by raising interest rates is really what they use.
well, this leads me to my second question. Why is it that Democrats argue that the economy is worse under Republicans and that Republican leadership kind of led to the Great Depression and then of course the Woodrow Wilson era and I believe it was Eisenhower era that led to even post Roosevelt led to depression, and if it wasn't for I believe President Johnson's spending, the Great Society spending, um, we would have greater amounts of poverty. I mean, where is that thinking? And of course, they believe Reaganomics led to
Right.
poverty and Clinton.
I know the
The argument,
narrative,
yeah,
and it is basically more of propagandizing, posturing, because in reality these policies go beyond one presidency. They go multiple presidencies, and the problem that we have is it's not necessarily just a left issue. It's both sides of Washington. It's the bureaucrats as a whole that agree to these things,
mm,
and I mean, they have all of the academics in their side. They can certainly provide proof that some of these things may or may not work, but that's really not relevant. What's really relevant is that they're appeasing their base along the way. Newspapers have to be sold, advertising has to be billed. This is really the media empire just basically supporting what Washington wants you to think. It's that you have to stick to the narrative kind of a
yeah.
mentality. And
Because I guess at the end of the day, right? I'm just a simple guy, um, you know, family of four boys, beautiful wife, and I'm just thinking, okay, if I was in $19 trillion debt, right? People would really be like, "Man, Jack, you're mismanaging your funds. Something needs to change. You must have some kind of spending addiction." So for me, I'm not a financial guy like you. I'm just a simple guy, and I speak to simple people. We deal, and I'm just again, what doesn't make sense to me is why isn't the government having to balance its budget, and why does it get to spend and spend to fix the economy, but then we're up in more debt? Can you explain to me, like, I just again speak. You're, I can't understand this, and that's kind of why I tend to lean towards more conservative economics because it makes sense to me. They're saying, look, we can't spend when it's applied, right? You know that Republicans have also been uh, tempted to expand the government, expand spending, get us into more debt. because there is pressure. But nevertheless, why isn't this something like why isn't there an amendment that says government must balance its budget? Why aren't we taking this more seriously? Or is there some type of tree that they're able to pick money from that I don't know about? And I don't know. If you can give this to me in a very simple way, and also for the people who are going to be watching this.
I really don't think it's that complicated, okay? That tree that they're picking at is called our pockets, and their reason why they're picking our pockets is because of their loyalty to the public sector and the expansion of the public sector. And you can actually say that there's more a war on entrepreneurialism or success. So because all of these laws that are passed that are unfavorable, that put more of a burden on the hardworking, honest people, um, create more of a void. The reality is that if Washington wanted to fix the problem, they could fix the problem. They know what to do. They would have. It would be almost inconceivable to believe that their own advisors do not know that, because during election times, if you listen to guys like Obama when they're stumping, that boy, they sound like they're using Reaganomics at its best. Okay, but then as soon as the election's over, they move back to the center or to the center left of where they like to be, and it's all really because there's always going to be another Senate race, or there's going to be some other local race, and it's all really politics. It's basically putting politics ahead of the people, and it's to just keep those few people of our elected officials in to have an upper hand. But frankly, I think that they know what they got to do. They got to make incentives, okay, and they have to stop implementing and stop implementing bad policies, and also um, making or empowering people instead of giving the Washington bureaucrats these favorable policies to empower them more to be more in control and give less choice to the people. That's
Well,
really what it comes down to.
yes, and so here we are today. Or this third question I have is, what is happening now with the Committee on Ways and Means, uh, especially with this press release kind of article that they put out, and obviously they want the public to know um, that the Obama administration, the article reads, has circumvented Congress to advance policies that empower Washington bureaucrats. It says, not the American people. One of the latest examples of the administration's executive overreach can be found at the Department of Labor, where officials have been shameless about their efforts to create Obamacare for retirement. And then they write that I guess they're going to destroy the voluntary system of private sector retirement plans, such as 401ks and individual retirement arrangements, and replace them with government-run retirement plans. Here's how the administration's latest executive fiat affects employers and workers planning for retirement. And then it goes on to list some bullet points, and all this can be found at the Ways and Means website. And it says your private sector plan could get the axe because of another employer mandate. You may lose, I'm just giving the header summary, you may lose control over your savings. And I guess they want to they want to make it so that by default your retirement goes into this public savings, which now
Not
is
by
it
default, by deliberation.
by deliberation, and then they're not required to have the same guarantees
That's
as
correct, because
private
the government
savings.
doesn't give itself the same oversight as it does to the private sector. It doesn't want to be told what to do.
And
They want to be held accountable.
and let me just read his last point. Your savings could be used to bail out failing public pensions.
Well, of course, that's what it's
So
all
talk
about,
to me a little
Jack.
bit about this warning that the Committee on Ways and Means is issuing, and you as a financial kind of advisor and consultant, what is really happening here that the average layperson needs to understand, and how big is this?
Well, this is really big, Jack. Okay, because this really comes down to the nut of it all. All right, there's a $25 trillion piggy bank called the U.S. Retirement System,
Okay.
overseen by ERISA, and in some parts the Department of Labor and
Hmm.
the IRS.
Hmm.
Okay, Now, also take into consideration that state fund pensions are currently carrying a $5 trillion deficit and have really not been able to come up with any concrete ideas on how to be able to successfully stimulate the economy, to be able to raise the revenue supply available, to be
How
able to
much is their
pay.
pensions deficit? I know it was something
Just
like
state
40
pensions, just
cents on the
state,
dollar, something.
well, state pensions are running about a $5 trillion deficit,
Yeah,
but they currently have about 40 cents on the dollar to
yeah,
pay for benefits.
yeah. State
Okay?
pension plans are underfunded by $5 trillion.
That's a huge deficit. So they have been, when I say they, the bureaucrats have always had a sweet eye for the U.S. pension system and how to be able to get at it so that they can obviously be in control. It comes down to rather having the private sector, okay, and you making the choices on your retirement. We know that Americans face challenges with their retirement. They don't have to tell us that because we know that what they did to our Social Security funds and how they raided those coffers years ago, and what's in left there for us and the future generations. So they're real crafty. So what they've done is they've created two major laws. One of them is called the fiduciary rule, which makes it very difficult for a fiduciary, in other words, somebody who's in a higher position of responsibility that oversees, in this case, the management of
Wow.
a retirement plan under the ERISA.
Okay.
And they've made a lot of restrictions and a lot of complications to want to even do that sort of business. So a lot of smaller independents and small broker dealers, they don't even want to be part of this retirement management anymore. They're leaving it toward the larger people, which I guess lobbied for this and have tried to, obviously get
Yeah.
bigger share of the pie. They can afford the extra, legal advice and tax advice that they need to do it. However, it really does come down to something that isn't something new. This is just another overreach and bypassing of the U.S. Congress to pass favorable policies that help empower the bureaucrats to
Why
tell
isn't
us
this
what's better.
impeachable? Why isn't this impeachable? I mean, you're dealing with
I'm
people.
not.
As,
I'm not a. I'm
yeah.
not a. I'm
I
not
mean,
a,
I
a
know you're not a
lawyer
lawyer.
to know what
Yeah.
that really does entail. Um, but I'm under the belief that anything that is a not tax neutral, meaning that it does raise taxes on people, it has to be passed by our Congress.
Yeah.
However, this executive order has really gotten out of hand for a long time now. I mean, for the last 8 years, everything that they want, they've done through executive order. And frankly, the reason why they haven't impeached them is because obviously they're all on the same side.
Hmm.
There's no other explanation. What other logic can there be?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about this again is, as I'm reading in this article, these government-run plans would not be subject to the same protections as private sector plans, which must comply with the provisions in the Employer Retirement Income Savings Act and the tax code. As such, employees enrolled in the government-run plans could lose their savings because of poor plan management. For example, if a plan does not invest money reasonably or responsibly or set aside enough funds to pay out the promised benefits. The rule also eliminates the long-standing requirement that people have access to their accounts at any time, which could mean that they wouldn't have the option to transfer their investment to a private sector IRA. Man, I mean, can you explain this to me? I mean, is
Sure.
this, I mean, this is scary. Like, they're saying you can't even access your funds when you want to. I know you get penalized if you pull out of your retirement early, but
Right.
nevertheless, that's my
A
choice.
penalty is one thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're saying we're
However,
not even going to let you access this.
however, the right now the only real similarity we have is a law that passed a few years ago, and it's for what's called the My IRA. Okay, and the My IRA account is basically a default to address the void for the lower income, the minority, the woman who generally tend to be less funded for retirement. I mean, Underfunding for retirement in the U.S. is at an epidemic level. Okay, U.S. savings are less than 4%.
Wow. And I
Okay,
know it's worse in the Black and Hispanic communities.
well, this is on an average,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas countries like Sweden and Switzerland are running around 17%.
Wow.
Okay, so
Is it that they're forcing their people to retire, put into retirement?
no, these are countries that realize the problem, and they're just pushing themselves to save more out of their own default because they realize
Yeah.
where the
But these are
situation is going to.
finance-driven countries. They're not production-based. I know their financial markets really is what keeps them operating.
Yes, you could say that like certain countries like Switzerland
Yeah.
are very heavily financial based. However, you still have people that save regardless
Yeah.
if they're in or out of that industry. The real issue
So
is
but they're taking control right now. With this act, this executive act, right, is really about control. It's like the
it's the
healthcare.
status mentality of we know more than thou about your money and just let us take care of it, just like they do with everything else that they want to do. They wanted to take care of our social security retirement. Look how wonderful that went. They've basically tried to confiscate those or have access to the what's under the U.S. pension system.
Hmm.
They realize that there is a void, but their solution is a government option. Now, advocates on the other side would say that there's no need to have a government option
Hmm.
because usually it's going to be a more conservative, less yielding instrument that they're going to use. At first, when they did my IRA,
Hmm.
it's voluntary. It's a default. Okay. However, the idea is correct, but the fact that it only gives you the option to use a government bond fund similar to the thrift savings plan that the U.S. military uses,
Hmm.
I think it's called option G, where it's just government bond. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't meet the needs of inflation. Okay. Our country has inflation over the long term. Unless you have an option to use equities, which are stocks based investments. For example, the S&P has returned over 10%. Okay, which exceeds the inflationary rate. Your money has to be growing for you in the long
Hmm.
term. Otherwise, you're stuck in the same position. Okay, but the fact that they only want to use a government solution, and of course, these are all done through the executive pen. None of this stuff has gone through Congress under a lot of criticism from Congress. Actually, they could have easily have done another option, which is called what do they call it? Automatic IRAs.
Yeah.
Like when you sign up for work, an employer,
Yeah.
they offer you benefits and they automatically enroll you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they could have easily have made laws easy so that one of those options would have been an automatic IRA.
Yeah.
So just like they take out money for everything else, why not give you an option to have an IRA account, which is set up from the default? When they initiated automatic enrollment into 401ks, they went from about a 60% of eligible participant enrollment to 80% enrollment.
Wow.
So it skyrocketed. They have the data. They know what works and what doesn't work. Yet knowing that, they won't put it in the private hands because it's all about the control and getting access to your IRA.
Yeah.
The bottom line is they want to confiscate your IRA so they can tell you how much you can have, what you can do, when you can have it. Again, keep you under control.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. So this is pretty scary. This is pretty scary. What do you recommend to people out there that are basically, watching this right now uh, and they're concerned? What do you think is a solution? What are some things that the average Joe can do?
Talk to your local officials.
Yeah.
Talk to your local officials. See what their position is and how they feel about this.
Yeah.
I think that this is a bipartisan issue,
Yeah.
and both left and right know the answers. Okay. Only problem is that they're not speaking up. They're not having that debate on the floor where they're supposed to have it to get consensus, so that
Yeah.
then they can decide to either stand and veto against these things, or you can't just stay quiet. first of all, you have to, as a person, be aware
Wow.
of what's going on. What are they doing? What are the consequences? And it isn't just a problem for my generation. I mean, we're in the same generation,
Yeah.
but after us come the Gen Xers, okay? And then after those people, you're going to have the Gen Yers, and it's just a perpetual cycle it's escalating, and it's carrying on further burden for people that never had anything to say. It's like, we don't have anything to say
It's
about
it's
Social Security, do we?
it's almost like we just need to put into our phone contacts our senators, right? Our Congress,
Absolutely.
our state
They
representatives,
need to know
state
you.
senate.
They need to know you, and they
Yeah,
need to know that you know what they're doing
yeah,
and what they're not doing.
and what I'm because one of the things I'm seeing is we keep getting hit with these things over and over again, right? We keep getting hit with different issues, tax issues, foreign and domestic issues. Uh, that we really need to get to a place where this type of, I mean, it's the least we can do, right? We can pray, right? We can get active. We can inform other people, share information through social media. We can vote, but we could also begin to lobby as citizens our own um, representatives, and we're not
Absolutely.
doing these things. We're asleep.
Absolutely.
We're slothful.
No,
We're apathetic.
we cannot stay asleep. We're living in some very dangerous times.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we have easy methods today available. There's a lot of grassroots organizations out there in every community that are out there, lobbying, knocking on doors,
What's a good
making a phone call.
organization that deals with these type of issues that people can go to their website and maybe get probably they've already probably jumped on it and have already
Well,
responding.
well,
What do you know? What the
there's
Heritage
a lot
Foundation?
of the Heritage is probably the best conservative think tank out there.
Yeah,
You also have other institutions like the Clarendon Institute, and they write very good academic papers on the subject,
yeah,
which can help, you know, inform you
yeah,
on what is being proposed, how they're behaving in Washington, and from there you can at least get a general idea
yeah.
of
And I know
which
Americans for
direction.
Prosperity deals with some of
Americans
these
for
issues.
Prosperity,
They deal
they're
a lot with tax issues.
they do. We just came back
Yeah,
from the summit a few weeks ago
yeah,
and got a chance to listen to some very very well learned individuals that are from, like, for example, different industries in some parts of the country, like the oil industry. We met one guy from a think tank
yeah,
from Ohio, and basically it is. I guess an ideological problem that we have that leans towards a war against fossil fuels.
yeah,
And the fact is that we're in a fossil fuel world, and you can't impose a war against the only solution that you have.
yeah,
And the again, it comes down to, killing jobs, stumping revenue, all of these failed ideological policies are what causes them to want to raid our
Well, part of
next
yeah,
our next bank.
yeah, and part of the green energy thing is that uh, the Democrats want control of energy. They can't get it over fossil fuels, so they have to create a
Absolutely
narrative
not.
that, hey, if we move into which they're in full control of, right? You know, and they're in a sense they're in control of the companies. They're
Of course,
it's really yeah,
they want to be able to delegate everything through CARB. They do legislation to
yeah,
control the emissions. California's got critical issues with their energy, their electricity, and it's all because of the overburden that you have with regulations. The regulatory system strangles a lot of industries, and basically puts a lot of people out of work,
yeah,
and if there's nobody working, there's less receipts at the cash register, is what it
yeah,
comes down to.
yeah.
So frankly, it's because most people don't care.
And
They It doesn't.
one of the things I've noticed is that President Obama has actually taken kind of a free market position on especially the oil production that's happened, which has really affected gas prices, right? Positively. But it's I think at some point he kind of succumbed to that, which has always kind of been a conservative argument, right? That we need more oil production especially here with some of the fracking that's going on. Uh, and I think that is, I mean, that's part of the argument, right? The more competition you have within our own nation, that's also part of creating supply, the more the oil prices and gasoline and things are going to go down. What's your thoughts on that? Has he kind of been to the right on that issue? Apart from the Keystone Pipeline, of course, he's kind of stalled that, um, but you find that Hillary Clinton, sometimes she's over here on the left, and then now she went to the right. I
Well,
guess
yeah,
it's all
it's
about.
a presidential
Yeah.
posturing, and I think the some of the things that the president does look like it favors, but then at the same time, he'll be putting an axe into the similar industry.
Okay.
You
So
can't
he's
do
doing that,
both.
but then he's putting more regulation and
And
actually
remember,
takes more
remember
control.
I don't attribute the price of the barrel of oil um, to the U.S. because we are just one nation. Even though we're the largest
Well,
consumer,
it's
we
what's
depend
happening
on the
globally.
world globally for
Yeah.
that, and we don't put a lot of pressure on the other countries. We basically bow our heads and
Yeah. Which I've
ask for
always found ironic.
forgiveness.
Why we don't put more pressure as a purchasing power.
Well, it has a lot to do with the 40, 50 years of wealth accumulated in the Middle East from petroleum
Yeah.
and the amount of industry and capital that they control in this world,
Yeah.
and they're able to basically sprinkle a little money on anything that they want.
Yeah.
The reality is that we should look at the Middle East and the track record that they have on human rights and the way they treat women, the way they treat gays. And that's where we need to really look at
Yeah.
when we're
Yeah.
looking at the Middle East. Not so much about, where their oil policy is. Because if you're like Hillary championing the cause of the gays and the women and the minorities, well, why are you staying quiet with these people that pay your husband millions of dollars for fecans fees?
Well, the thing is that because I think what I've seen with the democratic social philosophy and their tentacles is basically for them they're not really ideologues. It's all about control. And it's about getting as many people under their umbrella, whether it's Islam, the LGBT community, the
Well,
atheists,
yeah, they dissect
academic.
groups and then they
Yeah.
manipulate each
Yeah.
group.
And so it's
Sure.
really getting all these people under their control in order for them to get control of different sectors and industries and domains, right? Everything from healthcare to the oil industry, to media, to education. I mean, they just want complete, and it's an elite group.
Right, it's part of their playbook. They
Yeah.
like they like to micro dissect everybody, and then they
and,
control
and,
each
and it-
group
yeah, and
separately.
it's not like Muslim elites, are not part of this. I mean, it goes back to slavery. I mean, slavery was a multinational corporate movement. 1.7% of Anglos were slave owners. So I mean, it's the same dynamic today, right? The 1%, the 2%, and that's where, I mean, again, we're not against wealth,
Different
right?
commodity,
But
different
but
different
but but
century.
but yeah, but I think at the end of the day, that 1%, that 2% is in bed with this kind of global social philosophy where anything goes, and at the end of the day, it's really about the bottom line, and it's about getting as much as you can, even as you, in a sense, keep people in social, economic, and psychological slavery, right? And
Sure.
they always keep looking for you to feed them. I mean, look what's happening with agriculture. Look what Bill Clinton did with Haiti. I mean, there was a deliberate plan with this kind of North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, and what now is going to happen with the TPP is to kind of determine what country will control what markets. And that's, I mean, how scary can that be, right? Uh, that you are a U.S. president, and instead of your country being self-sustainable in production, right, innovation,
Right.
being able to operate freely from dependency from any nation, that should be your first priority. It's sort of like these guys get together in these Bilderberg meetings, whatever meetings are,
Bilderberg.
Bilderberg meetings, and they kind of decide how it's all going to, Mr. Soros,
Well,
and how it's going to,
that's the globalist view.
yeah,
It's
and how
like
they're going to plan it out.
let's us the billionaires of this world decide what's better for the world because we know what's better for the world.
Yeah,
which is really what's better for me is what's better for the world is what they're doing.
Exactly.
And they're willing to parlay a deal at the expense of the 6 billion
Yeah.
habitats of this world.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I like what Trump is saying. We need fair trade, not free trade, right? And we need to look at our treaties. Look at
Well, we
how it's
can't put
affecting us.
ourselves at a disadvantage. That's what a lot of these treaties do. They hinder our spirit of entrepreneurialism,
Absolutely.
and ultimately we are the last, I think, free nation to be able to, on any large scale, continue to produce the goods and services that are needed.
Yeah.
Now, we need to bring those industries back to the U.S., like Mr. Trump says. We need to incentivize them. We need to stop
Well,
choking them with legislation.
it's an issue of national security,
Well, today
right?
we live in a very different world.
It's an issue of national security, meaning if America cannot produce the type of infrastructure, farming, we got this company that Obama promised to kind of what are they called? It starts with the M. They do all uh, the they have all the patents on all the different seeds, and they do all the
Oh,
genetic. Yeah, you're there.
Montseco.
Montecito, yeah,
That's it.
yeah. Do you remember what it is? Adonis
Monsanto.
Monsanto. Yeah. I mean, he campaigned in 2012 and 2008 that he would kind of stand against their monopolizing of the food industry, and he literally put, I believe, the VP or the president as his food and drug administrative director. And so it's just like it just
It baffles the mind
yeah, it
what they
baffles the
do.
mind. It's like, man, like what happened?
Well,
And
didn't Jimmy Carter become the spokesman for ConAgra after ConAgra made a very generous purchase of his family's land?
yeah, and these are issues of national security. I mean, you talk about patents on corn, patents on potato seeds. I mean, people monopolizing that which God has embedded within nature, that anyone should be able to access, that anyone should be able to plant and plant. Food reproduces
Well, it's
itself,
all
right?
it's all legislation, it's all restriction, it's all taxes, it's all revenue. Remember, the government only manufactures one thing, and that's more taxation.
Yeah.
Okay, and the fact is that we need to wake up and look at what's gone on here.
But Republicans never they're not keeping their promise.
Well, Republicans is really just a name. I don't really see too much difference between the
Give me a
Republicans
good
and
Republican
and most
president.
of the
Give
Democrats.
me a good Republican president in the last 30 years who actually has tried to keep their promise.
I don't think there has been one. I don't
Wow.
think there has been one. I think that they have already agreed to to what is it called?
These people are in bed together, right? And they
Yes,
use the social
yes,
values issues to get votes.
right. But
But economically, they have the same kind of globalist, expansionist.
I believe that the wealthiest 1% are the ones that dictate what happens in Washington and in most governments around the world, and they don't differ their agenda from continent to continent. It is pretty much
Which
the
is the banks?
same. The
The banks,
same.
right? The banks
Well, the
and
banks are owned by the 1%.
yeah.
The banks are owned by the 1%ers, and they want to continue to make more and more money, and they don't mind if our backs are broken,
Yeah.
because if you really looked at how many different taxes we pay on everything, okay, and the thing is that again, these are created by who?
And
By bureaucrats.
this is the problem I
I
have.
don't tax myself. Do
Yeah,
you? I
no,
don't pass
no.
this.
And this is the problem I have with Democrats who think that government can regulate and in a sense work out an equitable, economic, just society. And the problem is that government has been hijacked by a lot of these corporate Wall Street guys. I mean, they just move from the public sector to the private sector, and they call each other on the phone. They go on vacations. They make plans on interest rates. So and people don't. So this, but for me, what's scary? Okay, I can handle the private sector, right? There's some greedy, um, owner kind of mentality people. But what scares me is when you have people saying that we want to empower the public sector, right? Government agencies, the IRS, even more. And it's just, we're going to turn around one day and it's going to be absolute tyranny in America. And people say, well, that'll never happen. The framers were historians, right? They were theologians. They were Enlightenment
They
philosophers.
knew history.
They knew that history always has the law of entropy working against it, which is there's always a downward spiral towards corruption, control by very few people. And they use military, they use tax, they use the media spin. I mean, the Romans were great at this. I mean, they were a politicking nation. They had adopted the Greek culture, and they'd infused it with power and might. They were imperialists. They were everywhere across the Greco-Roman world, and they played this game for almost 700 to 800 years. And then they had religion in it, and it was infused with,
Sure, they played with everybody.
yeah, and they had popes and priests, and I mean, it was and so